Good afternoon to everybody. It's more crowded than yesterday. Can I have some light in the room, please? Good. Welcome back. Did you enjoy the first day? Did you like the coffee break? Ready for day 2? Before you start, let me just remind that you have a few minutes to complete the survey. If you haven't done, please do it now. And after that, we are ready to begin day 2. Yesterday, we mostly tackled the geopolitical, technological, humanitarian challenges. Today, we moved a little bit more into economic, business, and environmental disruption. And we will immediately start with, although the topic today will be mainly economics and business, we will immediately start with a session on fighting poverty. The title is Human Imperative, the Survival of the Fight Against Poverty. And we have the great honor to have a very special panelist and speaker, the Nobel laureate in 2019, Professor Abhijit Banerjee, Ford Foundation International Professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Professor, welcome on stage. Thank you, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. Professor Banerjee won the Nobel Prize on rethinking the way we fight poverty, using data, creativity, on-the-ground action. And your work is not just a theory, it's about a real solution that can change life. We have a couple of questions together, then we will take a couple of questions from the audience. Let me start with question number 1. In one of your books, you argue that we often fail to fully grasp poverty. And therefore, our policies to address poverty are often not adequate. What is the main misconception we have about poverty, and what aspect should we and policymakers focus on?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is poverty is not one problem. I think poverty is like cancer in the sense that it's actually many diseases, and different people have different problems. And till we start by not giving as long as we don't give the poor the complexity of their lives, we underserve them. We don't understand that they still have to survive, they still do many different things to survive, and that we need to amplify the things that they do and they want to do, and not just put them in a box and say, you're the poor, therefore you need to do this or that. Let me give you an example. There was a study of cook stoves, which were supposed to be, they were supposed to capture the smoke coming from them. They were built into the small houses of people in a particular part of India. And it turned out that even though it reduced indoor air pollution, and indoor air pollution is a huge problem, they didn't get used. What did they forget? They forgot that these people also want to gossip. They used their old stoves were mobile. They could pick it up and take it outside. And so when the weather was nice, they could stand outside and talk to the neighbor and cook. And that was so important that it didn't work to build it into the wall. And that's an example of not thinking of them as living creatures who have many dimensions. They want to talk to their friends. They want to have a life. And that's where we make the mistake.
It's interesting because it reminds me of an experience I had in Brazil where an Italian NGO helped rebuild a very bad neighborhood in Alagados, close to Bahia. And people were living on palafittes, so they built small houses for them. They moved the people into small house. After 2 years, everybody had sold the small house and went back to palafittes because that was a milieu and context which they like more. The focus of your research is that, as I said, we do not understand properly poverty, and therefore we sometimes have mistakes in addressing it. So it's not only an issue of money, but money is important to address poverty. And today, with this noise of cutting aid that comes from some countries, which you don't mention, which impact can have that to the reduction of poverty in the world? And are we increasingly ignoring the needs of poor people in the world instead of addressing more the issue?
So there are two parts of that question. And let me answer the second part first, which is that I think there is zero moral case for, I think, what Europe is doing, which is suddenly deciding that we too can be cheap. I mean, what the US is doing is tragic, but I don't think that that should be seen as being a model for anybody. But the French and the UK have both announced cuts in aid as well. That's embarrassing and tragic, because these are not governments which have the same values, let's say, and so they could be a bit more generous. That said, I think it's worth remembering that aid is a small part of the anti-poverty work that gets done in the world. Very small part. In most countries, governments, local governments, do all the anti-poverty spending. It's not in Nigeria. The amount of aid that comes is a drop in the ocean. Nigeria is a huge country, and it's just not going to be. So there are three things where I think aid is going to make a difference. One is there are some small countries, small, very poor countries, Liberia or Togo, where it makes a difference. The aid makes a big difference. The second thing where it matters, and this is what President Trump is particularly upset about, is in targeting certain groups that the domestic political economy doesn't target. So gays in Egypt or something. This has been mentioned by President Trump and co-president Musk as being example of the bad things the US does, but in fact it reflected the US population's views in a perfectly decent way. The US population is much more open to homosexuality than many other countries, and therefore subsidizing and other minorities, women in some cases, education for women in some cases. These are priorities that to me are important. They are being, and aid has the advantage of not being directly connected to the government, and therefore may be sometimes more nimble. And the third thing that the aid does is it allows for experimentation. It allows for trying new programs that the government won't try because it doesn't like to fail, but it will actually have positive effects. And the USAID, one of the first things that they shut down was a part of USAID called Development Innovation Ventures, which was a small fund for innovators who would propose an innovation in development policy. This could be private sector firms, could be NGOs, could be governments, local government, and then test those with rigorous trials, and then if they succeed, scale them up. And this was funded by USAID. That was one of the first things that was cut. But it's the kind of thing that governments won't do, and yet they have great value.
Get ready for the question and get the microphone, functioning microphone in the nearby. But in the meantime, let me ask you, because you studied most of your life on the misconception and mistakes and understanding poverty. And we have a number of institutions that for decades have been addressing poverty, and government and NGOs. How come we do not understand the real origin of poverty? What's the explanation you gave to yourself that we do so many mistakes?
I think that it's very It's very, I mean, we make so many mistakes and so many other things as well. I mean, so it's not, I think, as I often write, economics is too important to be left to economists. And
Don't say it here.
And I think just the set of ideas that are people, people tend to be very reductionist. When you think of the poor, the theory is that, the poor should be, they are hungry, so they should be eating whatever, boiled eggs and bananas or something. And of course, they're real people. They like to live. They want to have a party sometimes. And somehow our conceptual space doesn't allow for these things. We want to simplify, and we simplify too much.
Thank you, Professor. Let's see if we have any question. We have one in row number 3.